William Shakespeare used to say, the enchanting strength of truth, la force enchanteresse de la vérité. And to find the truth is always a long and exploratory journey. Such roundtable on transparency is extremely valuable. Science, and I'm speaking about both art sciences and social sciences, should help us in providing facts, figures, and evidence for better policy making. Before giving the floor to the different speakers, let me just remind three important elements for Europe. First, the Article 10 on transparency of the European Radioactive Waste Management Directive. This is a very important article and we can be proud of it. The second point, more related to research, we have the concept of open science and open access. As you know, open science is the standard Commission method of working under its research funding program, Horizon 2020, and in the future, Horizon Europe. And the Commission requires beneficiaries of research funding to make their publications and their data available in open access. And this means to provide online access to scientific information that is free of charge for the user. And thirdly, that's my third point of the introduction, the Euratom research program supported and will continue to support technological and socioeconomic activities in the future. We hope to convince you on the quality of these projects through the presentation today on Modern 2020, SITEX, JOPRAD, and Euratom. Dear colleagues, dear friends, it's my great pleasure to invite today. We have a very interesting panel. We'll speak, then Anne Bergmans from the University of Antwerp will take the floor. Valéry, Mr. Valéry Detilleux from Belleville, a subsidiary of the Belgian Federal Agency for Nuclear Control in Belgium. And finally, last but not least, Gilles Hérard-Dubreuil, Director of Mutadis and Secretary of Nuclear Transparency Watch. I would like now to invite Anne Bergmans from the University of Antwerp. Anne holds a PhD in sociology, and she's guest professor in sociology of safety and risk and societal resilience. She's the scientific coordinator of the Master in Safety Sciences. And Anne's main field of study is the governance of environmental and technological risk facing scientific uncertainty and public controversy. A large part of her research is focused on public and stakeholder participation in technology development and the construction of knowledge, with a strong focus on stakeholder involvement in policy making and related research activity regarding radioactive waste management. And the floor is yours.
I was part of the honors project, which was mentioned very quickly in one of the previous slides, but I'm not going to try and link up to that because I'm then not going to be able to fill my 15 minutes with the things that I had planned to present. So I hope what I'm going to say is not too much of a different thing than the previous speaker, but as I interpreted, this talk would be to feedback from the interaction that we had with citizens in the Modern 2020 project, to just quickly, in order to situate this engagement activity, it's good to know a little bit about the project. Modern 2020 was a Horizon 2020 project which ran from 2015 to 2019. And it was focused on developing strategies and technology for monitoring, and to do so in interaction with stakeholders who would be potentially interested in the outcome of such monitoring activity. Just to show that there were a number of organizations involved, waste management organizations, lots of research institutes, and a couple of academic research institutes. And most of these were technical research done around this monitoring technology, etc. There were two social sciences groups, Gothenburg University and us, involved to try and engage stakeholders within the project. So the approach was that we had kind of four essential research work packages, one on strategy, monitoring strategy, one on technology development, one on demonstrating and trying to practically implement these things that were developed. And then our work package, which was on societal concerns and stakeholder involvement. We tried in as much as possible to bring in the views from various local citizen stakeholders on potential sites where a geological disposal facility could be implemented or is talked about being implemented, and to bring in their views on what monitoring could be, their understanding on technology and what that could bring. So that's a bit the constitution of the project. An important thing to stipulate, I think, that is that the focus of the project was on repository monitoring. So everything going inside of the facility, not so much not at all on technology relating to environmental monitoring and things that are on a technical level, let's say, less challenging than repository monitoring down there. Now, for people who are concerned about what's going on in such a facility, what is going on in their environment, they don't necessarily make that distinction. For them, the monitoring is the bigger the system. It's everything to do with technology, with people and organizations being responsible. So that's the first challenge that we had, was that this clear distinction we talk within this project about monitoring, of repository monitoring. Every time we talk about monitoring, it's about these things that can be put in place within the facility. That for the stakeholders involved, that was often a bit confused, because they always saw the broader picture and not so much these specific details about that. But the general, the common concern or interest was, we want to know what's going on down there, and explain to us how you can do that. So how do we go about this? We had a precursor project a couple of years before, which was Modern, an FP7 project, in which sort of the baseline was put in terms of strategy and state of the art on technology. And we also had a small task in there where we tried to set the baseline for the stakeholder engagement, and to actually, at the end of the project, came to organize a meeting in which we debated with some of the experts from the project, and a number of interested citizens and representatives from NGOs. And that triggered or convinced many of the technical partners in this project that there was actually something to gain in this, that there was actually meaningful discussion possible, and that exchange of information, even on this very abstract notion of monitoring something that you cannot touch, and that you cannot engage people in running around with sensors and helping with the monitoring, because that's often in environmental monitoring a way in for citizen science activity. So what we did here is we tried to put responsible research and innovation and co-production into practice to the extent possible. And we organized engagement activity at two levels, at the project level and at the national or local level of the participating communities or nations. We had some additional research activity alongside, but I won't go into detail on that. So at the project level, we had, for each of the groups that participated, identified two, sometimes it's more, but most of that had to do with budget rather than anything else, liaison officers for each group, who we tried to engage in almost every meeting that the project set up. So participation in project workshops, general assemblies. We also had a dedicated engagement workshop at some point after about half of the project, I think, where in which it was kind of more addressed to, or more time was used to address specifically the questions from the stakeholders in a setting that was dedicated to them, and not just having them to follow the pace of the project and the researchers all the time. On request of the participating stakeholders, we also developed together with them a stakeholder guide on repository monitoring, to which I will come later. And we had also some online interaction going on, in a sense that we initially thought we could have this kind of ongoing online platform where questions could be put and answered, but that didn't really fly. The interest for that was relatively low. We turned to an interactive survey towards the end of the project in 2 rounds, where we mimicked a sort of Delphi-style dialogue. So not a classical survey, but one round that followed the other to show the participants what the outcome of their responses was and what their kind of generated meanings and sense making from the questions and the issues that we put to them was, and so that they can respond to that, whether they agreed or not, whether how they felt about that. So in this way, we set up a sort of online dialogue or virtual dialogue between a broader group of stakeholders and the consortium members. This way, we try to identify what their appreciation was of the stakeholder engagement activities within the project, so to have a sort of evaluation on that from both sides, and lessons learned of these engagement activities, but also a shared view on what this notion of monitoring and repository monitoring was, how the governance of such repository monitoring could be set up, and what the role of monitoring actually was in a broader governance perspective of geological disposal. The engagement activity at home was that we made use of existing configurations where stakeholders already met with several partners within the project, with their waste management agencies, with organizations doing research on geological disposal and monitoring related issues. And so we came to the municipality of Yrjokki in Finland, municipality of Östhammar in Sweden, the Clis de Bure in France, and local partnerships in Mol and Dessel in Belgium. The latter are not currently a dedicated site to host a facility, but they do geological disposal facility, but they do host a research laboratory, an underground research laboratory, and these people are interested in what is going on in that research facility. Belgium and Sweden participated from the start. They were also part of that precursor project that I referred to earlier, and the Finns and the French came a bit later on in the project. The level of activity that we developed with these national groups was strongly influenced by their national program, where in Sweden the idea was to start to dive into the project from the start. The fact that the help process of the environmental court ran sort of in parallel at the beginning of the project made the participants wait a little until that was settled before they invested time in this project, because those people were also obviously interested in what was going on in this environmental court process, and they couldn't be in 2 places at the same time. Because of that, because of these issues, we had to adopt some sort of adaptive phased management for this engagement activity and adapt our strategy along the way. In view of the expressed needs and restrictions that some of these citizens had, but also the project partners. The work package 3, which is the one on developing technology, those consortium partners were from the beginning extremely positive and interested about getting those people on board, but early in the meetings we noticed that people were speaking on different levels, and it was hard to follow for people just jumping in and out on meetings. And so they developed sort of a process of developing index cards in which they placed the information on the sensors that they were developing, on the technology that they were developing, and then we set up some kind of Q&A with the participants in order for them to see whether they understood this information, whether that was helpful for them, and actually these kind of were the starting point of thinking about developing the stakeholder guide further. We set up some dedicated activity, the stakeholder guide, these engagement workshops, and separate activities aligned to the General Assembly. Always find new things based on the interests and the questions that the participants, the stakeholders had. These citizens involved in the project, they clearly expressed that they saw their role not so much as to influence the technical research or the course of the research, or to participate in doing research as such, but for them the most important thing was to develop an understanding of what this research was for, how it could affect them, and in what way they could then contribute to telling the researchers, the developers of that technology, the people developing the strategies, what was meaningful for them, what their expectations were regarding that, and so to help them, enable them to take that into account in their research activity and interpretation of advice of what could be done with the results of that research. So then the development of the stakeholder guide, I'll come back to that on a following slide, but that was particularly also to open up the debate beyond the project as it was at that point in time. So we had some specific outcomes. More reflective and analytical is the research bit. I'm not going to talk about that now because it's about the engagement part. So it was the stakeholder guide to repository monitoring, which we're quite proud of, as you can understand. I've been talking about it for a couple of slides now, so we'll move on to it. Next one, thank you. So the purpose of that was, on the one hand, to have some tool for science communication, to communicate what the project had been developing, what the outcome of it was to a broader audience, but also to arrange kind of a dialogue already within the project, but also in the future between heterogeneous types of stakeholders in different contexts. And that was very much what our stakeholder participants signed up for. It was clearly we could call an transdisciplinary exercise, because there were iterative feedback loops, and we had an editorial board with members of the different work packages, with us as social scientists and sort of the responsible group for the engagement activity, holding the pen and writing things down, but based on the input from the others and the input and feedback from the local stakeholders engaged in the project. In this guide, we discuss both technical and governance-related topics, so the various work packages delivered here, experience with participation was brought in by the stakeholders and by us, and the different geological disposal concept. What does it mean? What does the national context mean in relation to this monitoring activity? Target public was seen as quite broad, so our local citizens at first, but politicians, journalists, broader societies, anybody who was actually interested in this matter. And if you want to have a look, it's available in English and French on the Modern website. We experienced quite some difficulties along the way. I'm not going to hide them. But it was an exercise in really getting people on board within a research project. And the first difficulties were external. We had to get the citizens interested. We were able to draw on our first experience. So we had already a number of people and groups that we knew that were interested and that were happy to tag along. But we were quite obstructed is maybe a strong word, but the timing of national programs definitely intervened and did not always make it possible for people to participate when they wanted to, or when the project time frame asked for it. The NWMO stakeholder relations was also a strong influencer. In the Finnish case, a positive one, where the good relationship between some of the NWMO participants in the projects with people from the municipality connected us and them to the project more quicker than we would have been able to do otherwise. But on the French side, we had a not particularly good relationship between Andra and the people from Beur, which made the latter quite hesitant to come in, and the negotiations for getting them on board a bit, took a bit longer. In the end, further on in the project, they did come in because we did not go through Andra anymore. We went to them directly. At that point, we were also helped by people from EASN, which was very nice, which unfortunately is quite contrary to the position that's been taken at a higher level recently towards this anthropologist Christine Fazer, that many of the social science research community feels quite embarrassed about, if I may say so. We feel it puts a slur on these kind of activities, so it's really a bad patch. But I'm not going to go into too much detail. You probably have talked about this earlier on in this conference as well. Internally, we also had some problems, obviously, the alignment with other work packages, because they have their own goals, their own logic, their own thinking. And yeah, project logic and engagement logic don't always add up well together. Even though many of the people within of the project partners, the consortium partners, were quite keen and interested, it was sometimes difficult to open up internal meetings for citizens, often mismatches in time, which is important also to mention, but sometimes also plainly content. Work package 2 on strategy was quite close to the participants' interest, and so there was a lot of engagement there, and then they had hands-on knowledge that they can bring in there. The technology turned out to be very technical, but we found a way around that, and we had high hopes for the demonstration work packages from in the beginning, also from the people running it. But unfortunately, on the one hand, due to technicalities of the matter, but mainly timing issues that were never, they were late with things, and when we planned visits with stakeholders, it takes some time, and that unfortunately did not go as we planned, but we try to work around that as much as we can. We could, and yeah, the language barrier will always be a problem, not so much the technical versus lay language or jargon, but particularly for the French people, the fact that everything was in English and that we were not able to provide translation all the time because these things cost. For the Finnish people, for the Finnish groups also, more than for the Swedes and the Belgians, there were less people in the wider group that were able to connect directly with us because of the language barrier. So there had to be some translations made there as well. And these things were not budgeted beforehand because, I mean, then obviously they get in the way of other needs. Very quickly, a few key messages. People are positive about it from both ends. A strong point that our stakeholders made was that they were not prepared to legitimate research outcome. And particularly in the beginning, they had the feeling that some people were kind of on that road. So we had a lot of discussions about that. And their view was really very much want to open things up here. We would want to quickly close down and agree on everything. We want to ask questions and be able to ask questions. And it's a different type of co-production. It's not so much that you discuss and then close it, but it's more like they keep asking questions and want to be, it's like little puppies, they need to be fed. Sorry, that was inappropriate, but in a nice way. They didn't, and I think this is important, they did not seek so much engagement in the research, so they didn't want to be citizen sciences in that respect, but they wanted very much to be engaged in the research process, to understand it, to see how it's done, what it is for. What they very much appreciated was that they could witness the debate among researchers, because there was quite some debate, and many of the consortium partners at some points felt unease with that, because they thought, and what are these people going to think, because we keep on discussing things and it seems like we don't agree on anything and we don't know what we're doing. But in the end, it was reassuring for them that the stakeholders said, well, but this is what we appreciate, that you show us that it's not all, we know everything already and it's like this and accept it. So to get a good sense of the knowledge, and also importantly, the knowledge gaps was important for them. The rest of the things, they wanted to build bridges with the broader public groups that they represented. Next and last slide, please. The relative messiness of this interaction is what people appreciated, because it showed authenticity. It wasn't about cleaned up marketing messages, and that stimulates and trust and makes, gives it doesn't bring trust, directly there, but it's just of the seeds are sown for trust building. There was comparison was important, and also the liberty to discuss sensitive issues in a sort of safe space, to quote the bereaved Shell Anderson in this regard. A number of practical things to consider, but I think we can discuss that later on. It's the language we've discussed, but also accessibility of meeting places, budgets, people having to travel to meetings and that kind of thing. It adds to the cost of the research activity. And then I'll just leave you to have a look at the last slide when we discuss any questions that.
Thank you very much, Anne. I will just ask you, Anne, there are several points, several questions. I've tried to resume in one single shot.
Okay.
One question on the question of trust. How can we get the trust of citizens? And as a sociologist, I'm sure that you have some insight. Another question that was asked by Jean-Claude Autret. Another point by David Lowry about the skepticism of citizens vis-à-vis authority. And the third, where maybe you can share your thoughts about the integration of social sciences and humanities in the more, let's say, technological project. Then the question of trust, the question of skepticism vis-à-vis the authority, and the integration of social science and humanity in the technological project. I will not give you a lot of time to think. If you have the opportunity to answer now in a couple of minutes, I will then pass to the next, to Valéry. Thank you, Anne.
Yes, okay, briefly, and maybe tomorrow in the debate we can touch upon these things a bit further. Well, trust, I mean, trust is something that you cannot deliver like that. It's something that needs to be built up, and you have to earn it. So it's about, showing, it's about behaving in a way that you show that you're trustworthy. But a very important thing, and I think also that was part in this project, is that in order to get trust, you also have to be able to give trust, and to show that you trust these people to come into the project, and they can ask whatever question that they want, and that they're not directly immediately looked at as negative skeptics, citizens who are there to mess up your bright ideas, etc. So it's a give and take situation, and it's biases on what to expect from both ends are not very helpful in that. On skepticism of citizens, I'm not sure what, I haven't read the question, I'm not sure what this person is after. I think there's many different types of citizens. Some are skeptics, some are not. There's many types of researchers and decision makers. Some are skeptic and some are not. It depends on what the issue is. So I can't really say much about this. The integration of social science in technical projects, I think it's relevant. It's very necessary. Obviously, I'm a social scientist, but it's useful. I think it helped in the modern project, being involved in both of them. I think our role there has been to open up certain issues, to point out to some of our colleagues on the some of the assumptions that they made, that they sometimes and that was in the interaction with stakeholders often, that other natural scientists and more technical scientists, that sometimes they interpret their, they do interpret the results of their research, but sometimes with yeah, sometimes from their ideological background, their point of view on certain things, and that they sometimes are not aware of that. They don't do that deliberately, they just happen to do that. And we can help them point these things out. And I'm going to give one last example before I will shut up. A very specific example was that within the project, we were at a point when we were discussing parameters and going from a long list to a short list of parameters. When we questioned why all of a sudden some parameters were out from the long list to the short list, first there was a very technical reason about that, but I said, well, I don't understand all of that. Just tell me something else. Why then that? And that was, it has to do with budget because it's too expensive. And then we pointed out, well, yeah, but you assume that it's too expensive, and you may very well know that it's extremely expensive, but that is not at this point in time the decision to be made, because expenses is not an expert decision on what the parameter technology can do. That is something that the stakeholders, for example, also have something to say about. So it's these kind of things on a very practical detail that in my experience in participating in technology projects has been useful. It's been helpful to show and also to help show how science is developed and what the process of doing science is all about. And I'll leave it to that.
Thank you very much, Anna. Very rich insights. Let's go to the next presentation, and we have the pleasure to invite Valéry Detilleux. Valéry holds a PhD in physical chemistry from the Université Catholique de Louvain. He works at Bell Verification as a safety analyst and project manager, where he's involved in the review of safety assessments for radioactive waste treatment, conditioning, and disposal facilities. Valéry is responsible for the development and implementation of research program for supporting the regulatory review of the safety case for geological disposal facility. He was also actively involved in the European SITEX projects and in the foundation of the SITEX network, from which is one of the vice president. And Valéry is also the chairman of the Bureau of the General Assembly of the EURAD European Joint Program. Valéry, you have the floor.
So thank you for giving me the opportunity to present you SITEX network. I hope I will manage to keep your attention, even if it's late in the afternoon. So today I will present you the SITEX network. It's a European network of experts on radioactive waste management, involving TSOs, regulators, but also civil society experts. So I'll give you a general overview of the network, and also a short overview of the activities of the network and the interaction we have with civil society. So this is the outline of the presentation. First, I will give you the general context of the SITEX initiative. Then I will present you how we have moved from the initial SITEX projects to the SITEX network. Then, as said already, I will give you an overview of the activities we have in the network and the interaction with civil society, and then I will give you some conclusions. So first of all, about the context of the SITEX initiative. In the radioactive waste management community, there are different functions. There is the implementing function, which is responsible for the implementation of radioactive waste management solutions. But there is also the regulatory function, which is responsible for authorizing the operation of the different radioactive waste management facilities. And in close relation with that regulatory function, there is the expertise function. The expertise function is the role to give advices, to inform technically the regulatory function, so that the regulatory function can take technically informed decision. And then we have also identified the society function, which can have interactions with all the three former functions. And SITEX network is mainly focusing on the expertise function, on the expertise function, but you will see that we have in the network also representatives of the regulatory function and of the society function. Now I will talk a bit more about what is the expertise function, because it's the focus of the network. The key mission of the expertise function is to provide, as I said, the technical and scientific basis for supporting the decision made within the regulatory function. So it's written in the Waste Management Directive that the member state should establish and maintain a competent regulatory authority, and that the regulatory authority is functionally separate from waste management organization. So it's why we think that the independence and the competence of the regulatory function calls for the support of a competent expertise function, which is also independent from the implementing function. The expertise function may conduct several activities. For example, the typical activities are contributing to the establishment of the regulatory requirements, developing guidance for meeting these requirements, evaluating safety cases related to radioactive waste management facilities in support of the authorizations given by the regulatory function, develop and maintain its knowledge and skills. It's a common activity, it's a kind of transversal activity. And in particular for complex issues such as the operational and long-term safety of disposal facilities, the following activities are also essential for performing and overseeing R&D activities, exchanging between expertise function organization on different practices to find a kind of, if necessary and possible, harmonization of those practices, organize and or participate in training activities to transfer knowledge, and interacting with the civil society function. There are sometimes, these activities are essential to build the expertise and also the credibility, for example, vis-a-vis the civil society of the expertise function. There are sometimes some reaction about the fact that the expertise function conducts some R&D, and I think it's important to highlight that in the directive about waste management, it's clearly stated that all parties, so we understand including the expertise function, have to carry out education, training, and R&D activities. And it's also a recommendation of the IAEA in one of the safety guides. So now, so that's a general context, and seeing that context, the expertise function is decided in 2012 to create a new initiative that we call the SITEX initiative, and we have embedded in that initiative some civil society organizations. what does SITEX mean? SITEX means the creation of a sustainable network for independent technical expertise, so expertise function of radioactive waste management. And what is the overall objective of that initiative? It's to enhance and foster the cooperation at the international level to achieve a high quality expertise function. We also would like to stay independent, and it's important for us, from the waste management organization who have the implementing function. And the aim of SITEX is to support the regulatory function and the society function. And in the field of radioactive waste management, we would like to stay in that field, so including disposal, but not only disposal activities. So based on these ideas, we have started the SITEX initiative. And first, it was in the form of a European project. It was the first SITEX project under the FP7 program of Euratom program. And it was a kind of preparatory phase for the creation of the network. We have defined the needs and the missions of the expertise function. We have defined the objectives of the future network, and we have defined all the possible activities and interactions that we may have within the network and outside the network. Then, based on the success of that first European project, we have decided to build a second project, SITEX-II, that started in 2015. And it was also funded by the European Commission in the framework of Horizon 2020. And it was that time a kind of test phase of the network that we had designed in order to test the different implementation of the different activities and interactions. And it was also the opportunity to prepare the terms of reference of a future and autonomous network, the SITEX network. And that autonomous network, which is no more funded by the Commission, we have funded it in 2018, and it's now still ongoing. The network was founded as a French non-profit organization, as I said, in 2018, with 14 founding members from 9 countries. And there are members with an expertise function and members with a civil society function. We also have some regulators inside the network that also have some experts having an expertise function. For example, the Federal Agency for Nuclear Control in Belgium. And we now have 2 additional members that come also outside from Europe, for example, CNSC from Canada. So it's living, and the network is purpose to enhance and foster the cooperation at international level in order to achieve a high quality expertise function, independent from organizations responsible for the implementation of waste management programs, and aiming at supporting the nuclear regulatory authorities as well as the civil society in the field of safety of radioactive waste management. So it's coherent with the initial objectives of the SITEX initiative. And this purpose, this objective of the network is achieved through a close cooperation between all the members of the network. So we have a kind of plurality of actors and view within the network. As I said, nuclear regulatory authorities, TSOs, but also research entity with an expertise function and civil society organization. And it's really that plurality of factors within the network, which is an added value compared to other existing network, for example, EDSON and so on. So this is just, I won't comment this slide a lot, just to show you how we are organized. We have 3 different colleges within the network: a college for the regulatory function, a college for the expertise function, and 1 college for the civil society function. And all these colleges are autonomous, but they have representatives into the management board of SITEX. And then we create some activities of the network in which the member of the different colleges collaborate. There are different kinds of activities associated to R&D, but also to training or to safety case review, so SCR. but also pure activities dedicated to civil interaction with civil society. So now I will, those are the four kind of activities. Now I will give you more example and details about those activities and show you where we have interactions with civil society. For example, about the R&D, SITEX network is responsible for the coordination of the TSO college of the Euratom joint program. And so we perform that coordination. And inside the network, we also have some exchanges about the results of Euratom with all the members of the network, so including the civil society organizations. The network is also a strategic research agenda that we have developed during the European project phase during SITEX-II, and that agenda was one of the building blocks, let's say, of the agenda of Euratom. And so the network is now managing that agenda. And for example, this year, or in January, we have the objective to develop further that agenda to include more social science topics. And it's an activity, a development that is led by the Civil Society College. About the safety case review, we organize different topical days for all the network members. For example, in 2019, we have organized a topical day about governance of radioactive waste management and also the management of uncertainties, which is closely related to the governance aspects. In 2020, we have organized a topical day about the option of deep borehole disposal. And we have presented a literature survey that we have performed within the network about that option of deep borehole disposal. Also an interesting activity, which is quite unique, I think, that we have now just started. It's an activity that we call a safety case review benchmark. For that occasion, we have developed a fictive safety case for a disposal facility. And that fictive safety case was presented to different participants from all the colleges of SITEX, so civil society included. And now these members have the opportunity to make a review of the safety case, to assess the safety. And so the review will be conducted by TSOs, but also by civil society members of the network. And then those review outcomes will be presented, discussed. And the idea, we hope, is really that we can mimic kind of game of review, and that we can learn some important lessons from that exercise about the different review practices of the TSOs, but also about the importance of including the civil society, of engaging the civil society in the review aspects. So it's an ongoing activity. I hope I will be able to give more details about interesting results in the future. About training, we have developed a training module for generalist experts within the network during more particularly during the SITEX-II project. We have tested that training module in the framework of the SITEX-II project, and we have given the module once again in 2020 in collaboration with ENG, and we had different participants from various kind of actors and as well members from civil society organizations. We received a good feedback from the trainees, and so we are now thinking about organizing new sessions of that training. But due to the COVID situation, we are still thinking about how to do that. Last but not least, the activities dealing purely with the interaction with civil society. During the SITEX projects, we have developed an interesting tool that we name the PEP, which stands for Pathway Evaluation Process. And it's a kind of tool, of game that allow to have structured discussions about possible waste management pathways. And it allows different actors that have various backgrounds and which are sometimes non-experts about waste management to discuss together openly about the different waste management pathways. And it's very interesting and it works very well. We have used that tool, for example, in France, in the framework of the public debate about radioactive waste management. But we also have used that tools in other frameworks. And so it's really an interesting tool that we would like to use further. So it's in reflection into the network for the coming year. So that's the end of my presentation. Maybe some conclusion. So I can say that the participation of the expertise function in activities such as R&D, training, and exchange on practices contribute to develop and strengthen its expertise and independence. In the context of radioactive waste management, we have founded the SITEX network to coordinate such activities at the international level. And it is the result of an initiative that started in 2012, and that was funded by the Commission. SITEX network allows interactions between civil society organizations and the expertise function, and such interaction were tested in previous projects and really found enriching by the participants. And SITEX network thus involves a plurality of views and actors. And it's really that plurality of views which is seen as an important added value of the network compared to other existing network. Okay, so that's the end of my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
It is my pleasure to chair the session on recent developments in civil society access to expertise and research. I would like, therefore, to give the floor to Gilles, who will speak about the feedback from innovative processes in interaction with civil society in SITEX-II and JOPRAD. Mr. Gilles Valdalbero is the director of Mutadis, a research organization on risk governance. He's secretary also of the Nuclear Transparency Watch. As a researcher, he's involved in governance of radioactive waste management since 20 years, coordinated the project COAM on community waste manager, and recently participated both in the SITEX and JOPRAD projects, and is currently involved in EURAD. Gilles has worked on research on nuclear accidents and post-accident management since 1991 in Ukraine and Belarus after the Chernobyl accident. He also participated to the Fukushima post-accident management. Gilles, the floor is yours for 15 minutes. Thank you.
I shall now present several innovative processes that have been developed within the framework of European research in order to experiment new kinds of relations between experts and civil society in the context of safety. I would like to underline, while starting this presentation, the fact that the Aarhus Convention and nuclear process that was started in 2008, after 5 years in 2013, made a sort of a statement on the three major conditions for implementing the Aarhus Convention in the nuclear sector. Among the different conclusions was the absolute necessity for civil society to access expertise and research. This is why this presentation propose a sort of outline of what has been achieved so far in order to actually create the conditions for civil society to access expertise. Well, you can find here the, I will move directly to the first slide. You have a summary here of what I will introduce. So this is about the two successive projects, SITEX and SITEX-I, that has been performed within Horizon 2020. This, I will come back to the objective of those two projects, but into this framework were tested and developed experimented processes of interaction of radioactive waste management experts with civil society. So it took place during 5 years, and the ground of this is the Aarhus Convention. And the idea is to enable mutually profitable cooperation between experts and civil society. And in this perspective, to produce common innovative concepts and methods in order to make those interactions possible. This has led to the constitution of a European network, the SITEX network, that has been presented by Valéry Detilleux in the beginning of this session. And it has also led to the joint civil society contribution to the constitution of a joint platform, namely the Euratom platform that will be presented after. And this was achieved via the so-called JOPRAD project. Here you have the different steps of those SITEX projects. And in parallel, what we have achieved in terms of interaction with civil society. During the first SITEX project, we have, let's say, involved a group of, let's say, some 30 NGOs at European level within a seminar that took place in Senec in September 2013. And this was at the origin of several reflections that I will just outline briefly after. So the second SITEX project was more a phase of testing the concept in the perspective of developing further the possibility of this network while engaging civil society in this context. So it has also led to open future civil society participation to the preparation of EU R&D platform on radioactive waste management. And now, this is since 2018, we have this network that is implemented. It has been already presented in this session, and it does involve civil society experts. And in parallel, those civil society experts, together with a large group of TSOs, have been involved into the newly created Euratom platform on radioactive waste management. So here you can find one of the main outcomes regarding this question of civil society of the SITEX network. The SITEX project was aiming at examining the possibility for several components of expertise working for civil society to, let's say, cooperate at European level and develop, let's say, synergies. And in this perspective, they have drawn this picture which differentiates several functions that are attached to the building of safety. You can see it as a sort of a reflection on the condition of a nuclear safety culture. And you can see here on the left, the implementing function, and on the right, the society function, and in the middle, the regulatory function and its expertise support. Of course, according to the countries, the support of expertise can be organized in a different way. Some countries have their own self-standing institutions, like IRSN in France, which is separated from the regulator. There are other countries where the expertise is a department of the regulator. In some countries, it's also different, where private institutions deliver some support, some technical support to the regulator to build its advice. So we have in Europe different setting, but the function is in a way the same. On the right of the picture, you can see here, and this is new, and this is vis-a-vis the previous understanding of the safety, you can see here the society function. It's worth to remind that this is typically an outcome of the Aarhus Convention, because the society, which is here on the same, let's say, footing than the other actors, while the role is totally different, but this society is not there as a cherry on the cake, but it is there to contribute actively to improve the decision on safety. And in this perspective, we can see here that very important aspect is to create the condition of dialogue, of mutual trust between the different categories, the four main categories of actors, which are presented here. And in this perspective, already we can see that a condition there is the pluralism of safety. Of course, the implementer has its own safety, but it is not the same as the one of the regulator. And the civil society can, let's say, benefit from the expertise, the public expertise of the regulator, but they can also have their own expertise. So you can see here that the challenge is to create those conditions of, let's say, dialogue, of exchange, and at the same time to avoid different institutions to work in silos, separated, and while not confusing the roles of each kind of institutions. And this is very important to understand well and to find the appropriate role of each institutions. Of course, in terms of weight of expertise, the bigger piece of expertise lies in the hands of the implementer. A big piece, but lighter, lies in the hands of the regulator. The civil society has a very, very light piece of expertise, but specific to certain kind of concern. So we can see in this picture that the flows, the channels of information to civil society in this very specific context of building safety doesn't go from the implementing function to the societal function. No, it goes through the regulatory body and its supporting institutions. This is a condition of trust, and this is why this is the main channel to, let's say, feed the process of information of the civil society. Again, here, this is consistent with the Aarhus Convention. So this is, of course, different from the question of, let's say, citing, where citing clearly entails a specific role of the implementing function vis-à-vis the local society. But here we are talking of safety. And so this is the question, the problem that has been identified by SITEX, the first SITEX project, was to say how to organize the public involvement practically. And this is where comes here another interesting outcome of the SITEX-I project, which is a picture representing all the different steps and also layers of regulation that is attached to radioactive waste safety. We can see here, for instance, the local level, the national level, the European level, the international level. We can see the different phase of implementing, for instance, a geological disposal, with from the conceptualization to the post-closure. And we can see on the left the civil society with those arrows, which in principle should touch all the different layers and all the different steps of decision making. So this is really a challenge, and already we can see that, for instance, reaching this challenge at local level, for instance, when I mentioned citing earlier, is different from reaching the national level or the upper level, where it is more the question of safety that is raised. Of course, here we must interpret the picture, because the institutional setting is different from one country to another. And another, of course, issue is to manage to maintain those interactions a long time, over a long-term period that is entailed by radioactive waste management. So this was the outcome of the SITEX-I project. And then came the phase of, let's say, testing of, let's say, drawing the possibility of setting a network. And the SITEX-II project aimed at establishing the condition of practical implementation of this network of radioactive waste management expertise organization in the European Union, with several objectives like the definition of a common strategic research agenda, the establishing the condition of harmonization of technical review of safety case, the sharing of training resources, the sharing also of facilities, research facilities, or even human resources, and also establishing concretely in legal terms, the terms of reference of the SITEX network. But in all those activities, the SITEX-II, let's say, developed a thinking of the way to engage civil society practically. And this was a real challenge. So in this perspective, what has been developed and tested is the so-called SITEX double wing interaction model. And this model is really trying to achieve the how implementing the Aarhus Convention in this context. So the double wing model is a simple idea that not everybody is able to enter those complex and technical issues of radioactive waste management safety. And in this perspective, that average civil society people can benefit from support of more, let's say, knowledgeable people from the civil society that can support their interaction. So the idea is to have and we have tested this in the SITEX-II project, a small group of CS experts involved in the SITEX-II project, with a larger group of some 35 NGOs from 18 European countries, and with different roles. First of all, who are those CS experts? As Colin Wells has already in this roundtable underline the need for civil society to benefit from contact with experts they called non-affiliated. That means where they have some kind of common experience and common, let's say, common relation. And so they call it expert we can trust. That means expert from this area of civil society with some kind of knowledge that can enter the different problematics. That doesn't mean that if they trust those experts, those CS experts, it doesn't mean they distrust the other one. It's more than involving the CS expert is a way to develop trust with the other institutional experts. So who are those CS experts? Sometimes they have some scientific background, but not necessarily. Maybe sometimes they have spent significantly more time than average people on the specific issue of radioactive waste management safety. They are not, in a way, self-declared, but they are acknowledged by social processes. They are known as knowledgeable. And very importantly, they have a capacity to express knowledgeable views in a refutable way. It's not an ideology. Their views are supported by a logical argumentation based on reliable data. That makes it possible to organize the flows of information that support those interactions. So you can see here on the one hand, the CS expert, on the other hand, the larger group of civil society with different tempo, different roles, but the CS experts are there to, let's say, enable those processes of interaction. So in the SITEX-II project, as I said earlier, there was a kind of experiment of new patterns of interaction between civil society and the experts. And that took place in the one of the work package of the SITEX-II project, the WP4, where we had 3 different tasks. One was led by MKG, a CSO based in Sweden, with, which was aiming at developing a civil society contribution to the SITEX research agenda. Another one was led by FONC, the regulator of Belgium, and was aiming at determining the condition of an enlarged safety culture to support those interactions. And the third task was aiming to develop tools in order to facilitate, let's say, continued intergenerational governance of radioactive waste management. There were 5 different institutions close to civil society, and also together with experts and regulators. So the first outcome I would like to introduce here is the one regarding the shared safety culture. Why is it that there was an idea of developing a shared safety culture? It is because from the beginning, the experts felt necessary to develop interactions with civil society along the safety case review activities. That means along the long period of implementation of a geological disposal. And in this perspective, the idea was to say, in order to support dialogue and to make it possible to exchange with civil society, what would be a kind of shared safety culture? The concept of safety culture has been developed since '91 in the context of EAEA INSAC-4, and it is, the definition is the assembly of characteristics and attitudes in organizations and individuals, which establishes that as an overriding priority, nuclear plant safety issues receive the attention warranted by their significance. Of course, this doesn't only entail the safety of nuclear power plants, but also the safety of radioactive waste management. So this INSAC-4 document was very important since it has already established some ground to clarify the relation and the roles of the, you remember this scheme I showed earlier. I will bring it back here on the left, the 4 functions. And already the INSAC-4 has established the need to make a clear distinction and to avoid, let's say, dependence between the implementing function and the expertise and the regulatory function. And of course, this is a real question on the long term to maintain this independence. And this is a very strong concern of civil society to create the condition of maintenance of this independence. But at the same time, we can see that on the right, we have, let's say, the different layers of safety culture. And the red circle is, let's say, the traditional safety culture, which was developed by INSAC-4, where we can see here, let's say, the operational safety culture, the one which is used by the engineers and the operators themselves. But at the same time, on the right, we have this civil society, and the question is, what can be shared? What shall we share between the operating function and the civil society? Of course, there is a basis of universal rationals, a common set of values, principles, but the question is practically in the area of safety, what can we share? What can be shared? And among the outcome of this work package, and in order to avoid confusion between the role, it was explicitly stated that the question is not for civil society to adopt the operational safety culture, but more to find what could be the ground for establishing dialogue, for instance, with shared elements of safety culture, such as, for instance, the principle of priority given to safety, the principles of optimization, the concept of in-depth defense. So the idea was also to, let's say, define the conditions of such an emergence of safety culture. There was also an important condition was drawn, the idea that such processes as we see here should be established on a continuous basis, not one spot suddenly that the process is open to civil society participation. It should be really this type of processes organized in a continuous way with appropriate processes. And the question here is to build gradually the condition of mutual trust and to avoid, let's say, adversarial culture to be predominant. So this necessitated times and appropriate resources. And this is where we are today, is to continue to, let's say, make more precise those processes and implement them practically. Here is the second contribution of the SITEX Work Package 4, which was led by Johan Swan from MKG. And what has been performed here is a review of the existing XRA of the TSOs involved in SITEX, the previous SITEX-I project, and also the review of the implementers' strategic research agenda from the IGDTP platform. Out of this, the task has developed specific R&D issues that were proposed by civil society to input the SITEX-II SRA. And there are today some pieces of this SRA are explicitly being proposed by civil society. Usually civil society is an asset, let's say, to review SRA and to bring, let's say, enlarged views where maybe technicians or even scientific academics are sometimes, let's say, trapped by their own discipline. And so the idea here is to go back to sort of a complex understanding of all the issues at stake and to, out of this, to bring fresh ideas or complementary ideas in order to, let's say, make the decision on the SRA more comprehensive. So another late also contribution was the addition to the initial SRA of research questions involving social science and citizen science. The idea here was to address the specific socio-technical nature of radioactive waste management, which does not, let's say, cannot be reduced to, on the one hand, technical issues and on the other hand, non-technical issues, but that are embedded. So the idea was to bring some issues that were dealt with later on in the Euratom platform as strategic issues based on the complex nature of those problems. And the last but not least outcome of SITEX-II is the so-called series game, the pathway evaluation process. And the idea here, after being reviewed and analyzing a lot of research on intergenerational aspect of radioactive waste management, the idea was to try to build a tool which could enable successive generation to enter and to make their own vision perspective on radioactive waste management. There is often this idea of avoiding undue burden to the shoulders of future generations. But here we would like to avoid an undue absence of meaning of radioactive waste management. That means that each generation has to develop its own understanding and meaning of where it is, what has been the previous option considered, why they have been abandoned, what were their assets or their weaknesses. And so to create a sort of a live discussion around scenarios of what could happen in the long period of, let's say, conception, implementation until the closure and after the closure. So usually one does present the radioactive waste management as a sort of logic and optimized process, but the reality is different. There are, it's a path, there are failures, there are successes, there are also sometimes things are abandoned, or there are events which are unexpected. So it's not a question only of saying, if everything goes well, we will achieve the result. No, it's also with a serious game, the possibility to examine if everything doesn't go well. So what does it mean? If we have a terrorist attack, or if we have suddenly a lack of money, or suddenly we have a political failure, the institutions doesn't have interest anymore in radioactive waste management, for instance, or we have suddenly a new technology, or let's say the radioactive waste characteristics are changing and no more adapted to the project. There are several issues like this that the serious game offers the possibility to bring them to the table and to organize structured dialogue and discussion based on mutual respect. And it's really a constructive process which enables people not to reach a consensus, but to better understand and to better consider what are the key rationales that are behind one position of one person in the game. So this serious game has been tested, and with, of course, the SITEX-II partners and the CS organization, but then it was also tested with students in the Czech Republic, and more recently in the French public debate on radioactive waste management, with 40 students that have developed their understanding, taking advantage of this serious game. So we now reach the conclusion of where we are now and what are the emerging patterns of CS access to expertise. And what we have seen here is first that the transboundary and multi-level exchanges with civil society are representing a key asset for achieving radioactive waste management safety. We have seen also that this invention, or let's say this innovation of the double wing process involving, on the one hand, CS experts and on the other hand, TSOs together with the other experts is really enabling those processes to unfold and to really being practically achievable. We also have this idea that CS interaction regarding safety are necessary at national and international levels. And they are complementary and different from the interaction of the implementers with the public at local level in the context of siting. We have seen the processes that should be developed, such as this PEP serious game, in order to enable dialogue on complex issues associated with radioactive waste management, and as a sort of common perspective between all those outcomes, the idea that an enlarged safety culture should be developed with a special concern on intergenerational transmission. This is more or less what I wanted to present and to share with you from those specific processes of interaction with civil society into the SITEX and SITEX-II project. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I will then move on to the presentation of Mr. Louis-Théodon, who will talk on the EURAD platform and corresponding processes of interaction with civil society. Mr. Théodon has a master's degree in European project management and has worked as policy officer on European investment grants in French local authorities and as national, European and international project manager at Armin. Currently, she is a European and National Research and Innovation Project Engineer at ANDRA and the coordinator of EURAD.
So, as it was said, I'm EURAD coordinator. So EURAD is a joint program on radioactive waste management. I'll start briefly with 2 slides presenting an overview of EURAD, so you can move to slide 2. So EURAD is a joint program. So really the aim is to implement a joint strategic program of research and knowledge management activity at the European level, bringing together and complementing EU member states programs. This way, in order to ensure cutting-edge knowledge creation and preservation in view of delivering safe, sustainable, and publicly acceptable solution for the management of radioactive waste across Europe, now and in the future. So EURAD is really a step change, including disposal via the development of a robust science, technology, and knowledge management that helps supporting the implementation of radioactive waste management activities and fostering mutual understanding. So you hear the main objectives of EURAD. So the first one is to implement a robust and sustained state-of-the-art science and technology program. The second one is to foster mutual understanding and trust between all the participants. So it means all stakeholders, including civil society. The third one is to consolidate the efforts across member states, organizations, generations on knowledge management. So here, the means used to support the member states are the development, but also the consolidation of existing knowledge. As you'll see in the second slide, EURAD is really a large community. So we have different levels. So for some, it's really just like doing the transfer between 2 generations, or for others, it could be between organizations. The last objective is to elaborate upon complex issues and identify emerging ones. So this is more like what we call the strategic studies, but you'll see also on the next slide. You can move on, perfect. So EURAD is really a community. So the first thing is like it's a program and not a project. So it means that we have mandated actors. So 23 ministries from European countries. So we have 20 member states and 3 associated countries. They gave the mandate to around 50 organizations so that they can be the beneficiary of EURAD. So beneficiary here is also the same thing as mandated actors because we're using both terms. And they are divided into 3 colleges. So we have the waste management organization, the technical support organization, and the research entities. But EURAD is a large program, so we have 100 partners, which means that we have those 50 organizations that are beneficiaries, but we have also 53 additional organizations, so it's mostly universities and research centers, and they are here as a third party of a beneficiary, so what's called linked third parties in the European projects. But it also means that they are inside the implementation of tasks. They're really providing work inside EURAD. It's not like only a subcontractor. They're really part of the program. And the last actor, we have groups of civil society organizations, such as local communities. We have national and European civil society organizations. They are also part of EURAD. So really, when we're talking about EURAD, we're talking about a large community gathering all those actors. Next slide, please. So here you have just like a short image to show you how we have the interaction with civil society and where we have them in EURAD. So we have, for now, 14 work packages inside the program. The first one is the Program Management Office. So you can see it's a cross-cutting work packages around the whole program. So under this work package, we have a dedicated coordination task for the interaction with civil society. It's here to coordinate, support, and integrate at the program level all the interactions, activities we have with civil society. Then you have in orange the 7 R&D work package that we have for now. In green, the 3 knowledge management work package, and in yellow, you have the 2 strategic studies. And as you can see, we're also having interactions with civil society inside those 2 work package. So they have been selected for the specific contribution from civil society because they're focusing on generic aspects of radioactive waste management, and they are of interest for civil society in European countries. So just to let you know, the work package roots is here for waste management routes in Europe from cradle to grave. And what is behind human is understanding of uncertainty, risk, and safety. You can move on to the next slide, please. I'm not going to explain that too much because I know that Jill have already explained that in the previous presentation. So we have what it's called the double wing model. So we have 2 different groups. The first one is the CS expert group, which is involved through the channel of NTW. So NTW is not a beneficiary, but they are a linked third party of IRSN. So this is here the difference we have between beneficiaries and linked third parties. And then we are having the CS larger group. So there has been a selection procedure that was elaborated by the Program Management Office and that has been validated by the PMO and the Bureau to establish this group. So for now, it's composed of 22 members coming from 15 countries. And as you can see, it's a really well-balanced group because we have people coming from Western and Eastern countries. There is a well-balanced gender representativity and also a well-balanced representativity of different categories of stakeholders. So we have individuals, we have associations that are national European associations. So it's really a well-balanced group. The CS representative, they have no mandate and they represent themselves. So they also accepted to participate to the whole EURAD program. So it means until the end in 2024. And they obviously agreed to being supportive with the EURAD vision, to respect the roles, the goals and rules of EURAD. So this is really something that is important and worth noting in the scope. So next slide, please. I will just like briefly go through this slide. You have here the synthesis of the ICS activities in EURAD, including the civil society workshop. We're having 1 workshop per year. So where both groups of experts of civil society are invited. So you see here that the workshop is divided in 3 different sessions. We have 2 topical sessions on human and roots. So the 2 strategic studies where we're having interaction with civil society. And we're having a generic session follow-up on the RD&D work packages. So this is like more to show you again where we're having this interaction with civil society. You can move on, please. So now I think what's important is the role of those experts inside the program. So when it's coming to the strategic studies, they're here to just like map the key stakes related to the work performed inside the different work packages from a CS point of view. They are also here to contribute to the work performed inside the strategic studies and obviously participate to the working meetings of the tasks. And they're also here to raise awareness of the larger civil society group on the scientific and technical research issues. So that was for the part inside the strategic studies. Inside the task 8 of the Program Management Office, their role is to provide methodological support for CS interaction with the RWM stakeholders. So it means elaboration of materials, of methodologies, of processes, all those kinds of things to facilitate fruitful interactions. They are also here to organize, as I said, the yearly workshop that is involving a whole range of participants. And their role is also to inform on a regular basis the CS larger group that I presented earlier. Next slide, please. So where are we after 1 year? It's been now more than a year that EURAD has been launched. But I think it's worth just like showing all the progresses that have been made. Despite the actual situation, the first ICS workshop happened. More than 50 people attended to the workshop. There were several interactions and questions, so it was really a success. I put you here the program. So as I said, 2 topical sessions on the strategic studies and 1 plenary one. So this workshop was really the opportunity for EURAD participants to start the discussions and exchange with the CS larger group as it's proposed in the frame of EURAD. There were several possibilities for exchanges, so it means direct discussions. There was a chat, there were further email exchanges after the workshop. I think that it shows that it's a well-established cooperation and that the interactions with the civil society are really working well. There are regular exchanges, so it's really also a good sign of things working. It's foreseen that the next workshop will happen and will be part of the EURAD annual meeting. It was not the case for the first year because of the actual circumstances, but I think it will also reinforce the cooperation that the whole program will have with civil society. So to conclude, I think it's really something working well. It's the start, so it only means to work better and be improved. So thank you for your attention, and that was all for me.
Thank you very much. So you have been very good. We have saved 3 minutes. So therefore, I think that there is in the Q&A, there is one question that we can ask live to both Gilles and Louise using this time. The question is, what are the challenges of civil society engagement in an R&D program? I guess, Louise, you can start and then Gilles can complement. Thank you.
I think that the first challenge is that for now, the European Commission is not willing to have direct contact. So it's more like to establish something that is working well with the strategic studies first and be sure that everything is on set, and then we'll move on to the next step. But it's just like the first year of EURAD, it's like more or less the first time we're doing such a thing. So it's more like having the grounds that are strong and then move on to the next step. So I think that's the first challenge for me.
Gilles, would you like to complement?
I would say that the challenges are everywhere. I mean, it's not an easy attempt to bring CS people into the closed circle of European and national expertise. And in my view, it's very fruitful, but there are lots of possibility to fail. And I think we are currently trying to achieve this and to show that it is mutually profitable.
So I would like for this presentation to introduce Mr. Klaus-Jürgen Röhlig, who will talk on the entire research project in Germany, combining technical and social aspects of radioactive waste management. Mr. Röhlig has worked at the Gesellschaft für Anlagen- und Reaktorsicherheit GmbH Köln, when he provided research and advice to the Federal Ministry of Environment on safety assessment and regulatory issues. Since 2007, he's a university professor at Klaus Hall University of Technology Research, member of different advisory bodies and expert groups, speaker and the coordinator, amongst others, of the entry and transitions projects. Mr. Röhlig, the floor is yours. You also have 15 minutes. Thank you.
So thank you very much for inviting me. That were 3 very interesting days, actually, in an environment I'm not very much used to, and I appreciate very much that you invited me to give this talk. As you might notice, I extended the title of the presentation a little bit. I'm going to talk not only about Entria, but also about an ongoing project called Transcends, and which is not really a successor project. It's even sponsored by a different ministry in Germany. But nevertheless, I hope you will get a sense why I included this second project into my presentation. But I was, as I said, I was asked to present about Entria, which is a project which lies in the past, 5 years project, with 13 partners actually, which formed a quite interesting interdisciplinary composition. You can see that here on this overhead slide. Also quite a variety of disciplines. And basically we had 3 major aims. Of course, we wanted to do research, and our research topic were radioactive waste management options, or some call it endpoints of a strategy or whatever. I will come to that in a minute. But we wanted also to interact with society by performing several outreach activities, and a very important part of our activities were also the education of youngsters. We have quite a staff and knowledge management problem in Germany in this field, and we wanted to contribute a little bit also by providing not only disciplinary, but also cross-disciplinary education for our youngsters. Well, what you can see here, that's the environment we had to place our project in. And as I said, we wanted to address waste management options, which are visualized here in these 3 pillars. Basically, we have chosen these 3 options: final disposal in deep geology without arrangements for retrieval, then retrievable and monitored disposal, and prolonged surface or near surface storage, which were topics of 3 dedicated, what we called vertical projects, in which we addressed specific questions, mostly engineering questions and questions of natural sciences. But to our project structure also belonged what we called transversal projects. First one was technology assessment and governance. Here we had social scientists, political scientists, this type of disciplines, where we try to evaluate the technological impact, governance issues, and try to evaluate the waste management options with regard to that. Then we had a project, a transversal project run basically by people from law and from philosophy, where ethics and moral, but also legal issues were in the focus. And then we had interdisciplinary risk research. And the aim of the project, basically, or one of the central aims of the projects, was to derive evaluation principles coming from these transversal projects about the waste management options being addressed in the vertical projects. Why did we design the project in that way, or why did we try to address these options? Basically, because we had the feeling that in the larger political and media and societal space, there were a couple of misconceptions about retrievability, about possibilities of long-term storage, of the merits and the disadvantages of non-retrievable disposal. And we wanted to contribute by putting these options a little bit into context and by providing some detailed findings about them. And of course, the project had to be run. I had the pleasure of being the coordinator of this project, and we also had an advisory board. Well, what was important, and this is a bit basically a point which has been addressed by Anne Bergmans yesterday already. We had a composition of, well, an interdisciplinary composition. On one hand, of course, interdisciplinarity is something which comes natural with radioactive waste management. But what I mean here with interdisciplinarity is that we had in our, what we called in our project jargon, disciplines very far from each other. We had what we called technicians and non-technicians. So the technicians, the engineers, the natural scientists, or while the non-technicians came from social sciences and humanities. And you can imagine that this was not always easy. And I would like also to have an exchange also with Anna about her talk yesterday, how it worked in their case. You had the different cultures, you had the different mindsets, you had the different terminologies, the working cultures, the presentation formats and all that. So it was not always easy. I mean, you had also the stereotypes of the other disciplines, of course. And sometimes that was funny, sometimes it was less funny, but it was exciting. And I think we ended up with a variety of very high quality interdisciplinary results and products, publications, book products, and the like. Basically also because, or amongst other things, but very importantly, due to the self-organizational structure of our youngsters, a couple of research topics came basically from this self-organization, academic self-organization, which ended up in publications. And well, I'm also grateful to our sponsors, the Ministry of Research in Germany, that they gave us this freedom to do these things. And then, of course, as I said earlier, we educated our young scientists not only in single disciplines, but in an interdisciplinary way, which was very important for us. But we lived also in an environment. On this time axis, you will see something you heard about on the day before yesterday from the German speakers. So we had in the past these conflicts about nuclear power, about the Gorleben site, about other things, about red waste management in general. So I suggest with this choice of colors that hopefully these things are fading out a little bit, hopefully, due to the nuclear phase out we had in Germany and the ensuing drafting of the Site Selection Act in 2013, which was followed by the work of a commission, the so-called Endlagerkommission, or Commission on Final Disposal of High-Level Radioactive Waste, which, however, amongst other things, had to do things a little bit similar to what we had to, but they did it, of course, in a societal and political context, while we did it in a research context. They had also to address the question of endpoints of waste management strategies. And their work ended with a 2017 Act amendment, which basically initiated the site selection process we have today in Germany. And at the bottom of the slide, we say Entria. So we had our preparatory work still very much influenced by these early conflicts. And then the project itself was run more or less in parallel to this commission work, which caused some chances and some opportunities, but also some problems or some challenges. So both the commission and Entria were concerned with waste management options, with socio-technical issues. There was the risk, or perhaps even the fact, or the attempt of instrumentalization. So there was always some perception that there's something like good science and not so good science, and this perception was very much formed by political positions. So we had to credibly communicate what we did. That was no contract research. We did not work for WMO, neither for a regulator. We gave no political advice. However, of course, we were open for exchange and discourse. And basically in this societal environment, we were allowed to do a couple of project modifications in order to adapt ourselves a little bit. And we had our outreach activities where about 100 or so lectures, educational opportunities, interviews in media, and so forth. We were invited in political contexts, and we made also our first steps into transdisciplinary research by organizing a citizens forum. And basically the date of this forum, to have it earlier than planned, was one of the modifications our project underwent. So we, amongst our outcomes, was evaluation principles for these radioactive waste management options in the, could call it meta categories: safety plus security on one hand and fairness on the other. And as I said, we had our 2017 the Site Selection Act amendment, which basically defined final disposal in a repository mine with reversibility as the option to be chosen, which in a way embraces elements of all our three anterior options. And I think we contributed to the discourse about that during these years. And also I think our results on technical issues as well as on governance issues might be of your use in the further process. And last but certainly not least, we provided resources in the form of people which went into the business and which were educated in an interdisciplinary way. So why now to continue with transdisciplinary research? We have new challenges coming from the site selection procedure, and there might be a certain gap between science on one hand and civil society on the other. And it's well recognized that the normal way, we just need to better communicate what we are doing, and then people will trust us, is no longer sufficient. That's a given, I guess. And this is why the new project team of Transcends decided to set up a project with transdisciplinary research. You find a lot of definitions for transdisciplinarity in the literature. We defined for ourselves transdisciplinary research as a reflexive, integrative, methodology-driven scientific principle, which should contribute to solving a societal problem and which should rely on expertise from non-specialists and from actors from practice in our problem-oriented research processes. Which means basically this view graph stems from one of our project partners from the Transdisciplinary Lab in Zurich, ETH, which means that we with our research are somehow at the interface of the real world on one hand and science on the other. And then we have these iteration cycles. But this does not come without challenges, as you will see in a minute. But first about our topics. We defined 4 theme corridors. Theme corridor means that the exact research topic can undergo changes during our transdisciplinary research. One is dealing with the process, with path dependencies, with unexpected consequences of early choices in the process and so forth. The second one is concerned with safety. Safety is a special and central issue of discussion. And on one hand, you have the safety case as a well-established tool, but on the other hand, you have doubts and criticisms in society about that. Third one is about technology, uncertainty, complexity, and trust. And here monitoring both environmental and repository modeling, as introduced by Anne yesterday, are topics here. And then we have dialogue and process design, law, fairness, governance. So this is the concept of fairness, how this has to be implemented into governance procedures and into legal considerations. And then again, we are planning to do education, and we have accompanying research, formative research, which means that about our transdisciplinary approaches, we get feedback in order to adjust them during the project course. So you have seen this already. And now we have in Germany the ongoing site selection procedure. And basically in parallel to the first phase, we have our Transcends project, which means that we have, again, to make ourselves clear about what we are doing and what we are not doing. we are not part of the process. We are no actor. It's what we call in Germany application-oriented basic research, not funded by WMOs or regulators. Our definition of transdisciplinarity does not mean that we are doing transformative research. So there's kind of balance to be kept here, how much we could criticize the process, but we should certainly not directly influence the process. Our civil society interaction does not so much rest on organizations, on NGOs, but rather on people recruited by certain procedures in a multi-step process, which should not be stakeholders, not be specialists. And our first experiences are really, these people are enthusiastic, they commit themselves, they organize themselves, they take the challenge. Despite of the COVID-19 situation we have at the moment, you can imagine that this is a little bit of a problem, especially for our transdisciplinary formats. But so far, we managed quite well. We had to postpone a couple of things. We did other online with varying success, but in general, we are on a good track, I guess. And with this, I would like to conclude, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Klaus. First, since we are with you, Klaus, there is a question, well, a comment, but maybe you wanted to comment back. The comment is in French, and I will translate it. Deep disposal is not elimination of waste, but entrusting nature with the management of waste that the current technologies have not been able to carry out.
Actually, our approach, I hope I got the question correctly.
Actually, it's a comment more than a question.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, the choice of the options for entry, we consider they were very much driven by what is available technologically at the time. So I don't know whether that is appropriate comment. Probably I didn't fully understand what was meant.
No, it's, I mean, okay, fair enough. I have another comment. I have a more pointed question. What is the main challenge to the commissioning reactors from an RWM point of view?
Was it for me as well?
Yes, I think so. I guess so.
For the decommissioning of reactors. I mean,
it's a bit, if you can make a comment, if not.
Well, basically, the projects I was talking about were about high-level waste, so not so much about decommissioning waste. What should I say about that?
Maybe you can think about it. All three parties can think about it and answer in writing.
I mean, in Germany, and that's probably what I could say, is that the timing of acceptance of decommissioning waste is going to be a challenge for the Conrad project, which is very much a topic of societal debate right now, but that has not really something to do with the projects I was presenting.
I have one question that's been relayed over the phone to Louise and Gilles. What proportion of ordinary citizens were involved in this their working group? How much of the budget is allocated for them for their work?
Actually, they're not having funds from the EC in the project. They're here as a larger group, but they're not beneficiaries or linked third parties. So they are not having any funds for the work. For the CS experts, yes. From Gilles, from NTW that are involved in the program, they're having budgets. I don't have the numbers right here because we're having more than 100 partners, so I don't have the numbers by heart.
What I can say is that clearly there are two groups. Some civil society people as experts doing work to make it possible to facilitate those interactions. They spend time. But they spend a lot of time. It's a question of weeks, months, etc. And they are paid as normal workers, as other researchers, according to the same type of format. The other one are not directly engaged in the work, but they participate to workshop, might be 1 or 2 meetings a year, and they are reimbursed for the cost of the travel, of subsistence, but they don't get money for their work because, in fact, they do not produce work. They participate to meetings. It's a bit different. Of course, in SITEX, there was a small group of researchers involved with MKG, with Energia Club, etc. And there was, let's say, 5-6 institutions involved as partner, and a very large group of, let's say, 30-35 people invited to participate to regular meeting twice a year. What we try to do here is maybe not to engage with all the civil society people in Europe, but to show that at least it is possible to achieve projects where at least part of them are involved directly. They enter the discussion of the researcher, but they are not researchers by themselves. It's not their job. Their job to link with civil society. And at the same time, there are people interested to participate, but not to spend weeks or months on this because they don't have time for this. And it's, if the key question which is behind is the possibility to achieve a sustainable, let's say, pattern of engagement for CS experts that are not institutional one. And I think we are not trying to, we cannot solve the problem in general, but trying to show it is possible. There are other models, for instance, in Sweden with the Waste Fund, which is supporting groups of experts like MKG and the other one, Niklas, or I don't remember exactly the name. But there are also, let's say, surveys. For instance, the CLIS in France, the local commission, they sometimes they receive, let's say, they commission studies. So what I want to say is that one has to make a distinction between the one who, let's say, start to develop professional skills and the other one which are more involved, but who do not want to enter so much into the issues. It's a more or less what I can say.
Okay, thanks very much, Gilles and Louise. I think this session is closed with this, and thank you very much again for the three speakers. Thank you.